Greetings everyone, and welcome to another Halloween horror movie review. Today we'll be taking a look at Frankenstein Unbound from 1990. Roger Corman's first directorial effort in nearly 20 years. Yeah, he'd produced umpteen billions of things, but this was the first thing he'd actually directed in almost 20 years. Pretty cool stuff. Kind of a revisionist take on the Frankenstein story, mixing in time travel and sci-fi and all kinds of cool stuff. Starring John Hurt and Raul Julia. Man, we are in for a treat. Frankenstein Unbound, today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. So the story opens in the far-flung future of 2031. Much of Earth has been devastated or damaged by horrible wars, and John Hurt plays Dr. John Buchanan, who is a scientist who is under contract from the government trying to develop a weapon that will only eliminate specific targets without damaging the environment, because Earth has become darn near uninhabitable because of damage from wars and nuclear weapons and all that fun stuff. So he's trying to develop a weapon that will only focus on a specific target. And he's very close. Very close. However, there's a bit of a side effect to the weapon he's developed. It's kind of like this super laser beam that zeroes right in on a target and makes it disappear. But it doesn't really disappear. It actually sends it somewhere else in time. Now there's an unfortunate side effect to this weapon. So as they're ripping little tiny holes in the space-time continuum to send these desired targets away, it's having kind of a backfire effect where when they send something off into the time-space continuum, a rip opens and something else comes through. But it's only temporary. Whatever comes through seems to go back, and then the rift closes, and then everything goes back to normal. So the powers that be are concerned about this side effect because, well, you know, you're trying to create this weapon that's not going to have an adverse effect on the environment, but we can't be having these random rips in the fabric of space and time appearing all over the place every time we use it. So he's trying to figure out how to get it to work safely and only affect the target that they focus on. So after a somewhat successful experiment, Dr. Buchanan goes home to kind of mull things over and figure out how they can take care of this time slip problem. But no sooner does he arrive than one of the aforementioned time slips opens right over top of him, and this ancient soldier comes out brandishing his sword, and he's about to kill him, and then he gets sucked back through the warp. But then, Dr. Buchanan also gets sucked back through the warp. And he wakes up in a country field, not knowing where he is. Fortunately, his ultra-futuristic car got pulled through the rift with him. And the car is kind of like the Knight Rider car, where it talks to him, it has a computer data bank built in, and so forth. So he's trying to link up with the mainframe at the lab, but the car can't find it. And he's like, well, what about satellites? It's like, well, the car can't find any satellites. And he quickly comes to realize he's been pulled back in time to 1817. So he makes his way to the nearest village, goes to a small pub to get something to drink and to eat. He doesn't have any money from the era, of course, but he is able to barter some jewelry that he has, and he's able to get enough to get some food and have a little bit left over afterwards for anything else he might need. He later gets some clothes more appropriate to the era and so forth. So while he waits for his food, he's looking for somewhere to sit. And he sees a table with a gentleman sitting there reading the paper, and no one else is sitting there, so he joins him. So they begin to speak and realize that they are kind of kindred spirits. They're both men of science, so they're talking about science a little bit. And the gentleman takes note of Dr. Buchanan's watch. The watch beeps, and he looks at it, and he's like, oh, is that a timepiece? And he says, yes, it is. And he said, may I look at it? So he looks at it, and he's quite fascinated by it because, of course, it's a digital watch, which is something that's unheard of. And he says, well, there's no hands, there's no moving parts. It seems like the tiny little chambers fill with some kind of liquid. Is it mercury? And he's not, like, thinking, oh, this is, like, beyond my understanding. He's fascinated by it. He's interested in it. He has a scientific mind, and he just wants to know how it works. So they're chatting a little bit, and then the other gentleman has to go. And he says, my name is Dr. John Buchanan, and who are you? And he says, Dr. Victor Frankenstein. Dr. Buchanan's face just goes white, and he realizes in that moment, you can tell, this is like John Hurt, wonderful actor. You can tell in that moment, all the thoughts rushing through the character's head is like, oh my God, it's not just a story. It's true. This is the guy. And this begins what I like to call a series of incidents of Dr. John Buchanan putting his foot in his mouth. So he immediately says, oh, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, I'm a great admirer of your work. And Dr. Frankenstein just says, you must be mistaken, my work is quite unknown. And he leaves. He goes to the trial of Justine Moritz, and he sees Mary Shelley sitting in the stands. So he says, he talks to one of the clerks, he says, oh, is that Mary Shelley? And he's like, Mary Godwin, they're not married. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. So, okay, he gets that wrong because he's just not thinking of the time period. So then he goes over and sits next to her and strikes up a bit of conversation, and he says, I'm a huge admirer of your writing. And she's like, you must be mistaken, sir. I have nothing published yet. And then, of course, the whole thing with Victor Frankenstein at the beginning is like, oh, I'm a huge admirer of your work. I'm afraid you're mistaken. My work is quite unknown. And it just seems like there's this string of examples of him just kind of blurting things out that haven't happened yet, or that he shouldn't know, and he's just arousing the suspicions of the people that he's talking to. But, I don't know. It's all part of the fun, right? So it's interesting to see where they decided to drop Dr. Buchanan into the Frankenstein story. So we learn fairly quickly that the point where we've come in is a little ways into the story. If you know the original story from the book, it's after the monster has killed Victor's brother William, and it's around the time that the monster is requesting of Frankenstein that he create a companion for him so that he can just go off, they can go off and be by themselves and not bother humanity ever again. But much like in the book, Victor has rejected his creation, wants nothing to do with him, just sees him as an abomination, as a wretch, as something he doesn't want anything to do with, just wants him to go away, wants to destroy it, or just have it be gone from his life. So Dr. Buchanan, of course, knows how the story plays out, so he's trying to push Victor in a direction where things might work out a little better than they did in the original story. In fact, at one point, he even goes to the private home of Lord Byron, where he is entertaining guests, namely Percy Bysshe Shelley and Mary Godwin. Lord Byron, incidentally, is played by a strapping young Jason Patrick. And Mary is played by a beautiful young Bridget Fonda. So essentially we have Dr. John Buchanan bumbling his way around through 1817, trying to change everything that happened in the story. One of the big events that he tries to change is the whole trial and subsequent execution of Justine Moritz, who was accused of killing William. Because he, of course, knows the truth. He knows Victor knows the truth. He pleads with Victor to plead on her behalf and explain the truth of what happened. And he said, well, I can't do that because then they would know about the monster. They would know about what I did. I can't. I mean, all great discoveries require sacrifice, and her life means nothing in the grand scheme of things. So there's some interesting moral questions at play here. I mean, we, of course, all know the story, but so does Dr. Buchanan. And it's interesting to see how he chooses to try to influence how things happen. Now, of course, taking it as read that this is something that really happened in the past, he, as a time traveler, is blatantly ignoring the laws of causality. He even has sex with Mary Shelley at one point. Yeah, if you go into the past, generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is don't have sex with anybody because you might end up as your own grandfather. And further ignoring the laws of causality, Dr. Buchanan is blatantly telling people what their future is. Like, for example, he goes for a nice country drive with Mary Shelley. Oh, sorry, Mary Godwin. And, takes her in his car, and they're driving along, and he's explaining how, it's not a horseless carriage, it's a car, it's electric, it's a machine, and so forth. And, by the way, how's your book coming along? And she's like, what? I've only just started writing it. It's like, oh, well, here, I printed out a copy. Now, you realize, if she actually read the copy of the book that he printed out, that's going to create a huge paradox. Because then, who actually wrote the book? It's like she reads it and just copies it all down. It's like, well, who actually wrote it? In that case, nobody wrote it, because Mary was in the process of writing it. She hadn't written it yet. He printed it out. So then she copied it down for the printout. But who wrote it originally? Thankfully, Mary has the good sense to not want to know her future, and puts the printout away after looking at the title page. Whew, thank goodness. So, as with most time travel stories, it's probably best not to think too hard about the time travel aspects of it, and just kind of enjoy it as a fun little story that takes place in the past. It puts me in mind of the old TV series The Time Tunnel, where every week they would blatantly ignore the laws of causality and actually go back in time to try to change events from history. I think the first episode, they prevent the sinking of the Titanic. Okay, yeah, that's not going to affect history at all. So this kind of reminded me of that type of time travel story, where it's like, Dr. Buchanan's a scientist. If anybody should know about this stuff, it's him, but he just kind of keeps bumbling around, showing stuff from the future and explaining things. But, I don't know. On the one hand, the conversations he has with Victor, I can let go, because he's a fellow scientist, and he just kind of immediately accepts that Dr. Buchanan knows stuff about electricity and mechanics that he doesn't, and he's curious about it. He has a natural scientific curiosity, and that's fine. I can buy that. But the interactions with Mary Shelley, while they are fun, could have been potentially very damaging to the timeline. But, we just kind of let that go. Yeah, this is what happens when you have a Doctor Who fan watching time travel movies. Yeah. Actually, in a way, I guess it's a little more reminiscent of Back to the Future, because he's got a snazzy car, which, by the way, is a 1988 model car that he was using in the far-flung future of 2031. Hey, I guess he likes the classics, right? And he's got it decked out with this cool computer and everything, so, And it must be quite a computer on there, too, because even without access to the internet or the mainframe from his lab or anything, it has vast amounts of knowledge built into it, which is not, that far-fetched when you think about it. You think that back in the day, 1 gigabyte would be a massive hard drive tower system, and now we have a little thumb drive with 256 gigabytes that's no bigger than a stick of gum. So the idea that a car computer could have a vast database of information and knowledge, the virtual full compendium of the knowledge of mankind in it, 10 years from now, it's not that far-fetched. That would be a few thumb drives worth of data, Put all of Wikipedia in there and you're all set. Go to the past, have fun, you got everything you need right there. Now, regarding the ending. Now, much like in the book, the monster is a little ticked off that Victor won't make a mate for him. So, he goes off and kills Elizabeth, Victor's fiancée. So Victor recovers the body and coerces Dr. Buchanan to help him. He's going to resurrect her using the same science that he used to create the monster in the first place. But he needs a lot of power, and he feels that the car would be able to generate enough power to make it happen. And then on top of that, there's a thunderstorm that just happens to come along at the perfect moment, because they always do. And between the thunderstorm and the car, they'll have enough power to do it. So prior to the experiment to resurrect Elizabeth, Dr. Buchanan talks to the car and has it run some calculations to see if it's going to be possible for it to open another rift to get him back home. And the car informs him that actually it's possible to open another rift, but you can't go back to the time that we started at, so it's not possible to go back. As soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, so it's Quantum Leap then. So essentially, he wants to stop Victor from having access to all this technology that is essentially provided to him. So he instructs the car to open another time rift at the time of the experiment. So they run the experiment. Elizabeth is brought back to life. What happens, happens. Another time rift opens in the sky. And Dr. Frankenstein is just looking up at it. He's like, what on earth is that? And Dr. Buchanan just turns to him and says, meet my monster. A beautiful line delivered fantastically by John Hurt. It's quite an epic little moment. So the time rift opens and it sucks all of them through it. Next thing you know, we're in an even farther future than where we started from. Undetermined. We don't know exactly what year it is. So Victor and the monster have their final confrontation, and the monster runs off. Victor dies, and his last dying wish is for Dr. Buchanan to kill the monster. So Dr. Buchanan chases the monster and chases him to this underground laboratory, which apparently is Dr. Buchanan's laboratory. So it's an even more post-apocalyptic future than what we saw at the beginning, which is apparently a direct result of the new weapon that Dr. Buchanan developed. The side effects had much more damaging effects than they realized. And it's too late to fix it. The world's been devastated. All that's left is a single city, a massive city in the horizon. There's the last vestiges of mankind. So the doctor makes his way down to a lab where he confronts the monster. And here's the thing. All the machinery and computer banks and everything in the lab are literally controlled with the clapper. Yep. So he confronts the monster and with some very aggressive clapping gets a bunch of laser beams to focus on the monster and fry him on the spot. So he literally defeats the monster with laser beams controlled by the clapper. Sure, why not? I guess in 1990 the clapper was kind of a big new thing, I guess. I don't know. Honestly, it was... I watched it twice and I thought, did I miss something in the ending there? Like, I feel like I'm not quite following what's going on at the end here. So I watched it again and I paid rapt attention again. And I was like, huh. No, it really doesn't make much more sense this time around either, but whatever. You know, overall, I have to say, I really enjoyed this a lot, and, I watched it twice in, like, a week, and it just kind of has this goofy charm to it. I can't really put my finger on it. I mean, I've always been kind of amused by... I mean, I love time travel stories, but I've always been kind of amused by the ones that just kind of ignore the rules and just do their own thing anyway, and this is definitely one of those. But I gotta say, the real joy in this is to see a lot of the interplay between John Hurt and Raul Julia. So we have John Hurt as the scientist from the future, Raul Julia as Dr. Frankenstein, and the interplay between them is wonderful. I mean, these are two fantastic actors, and it's just great to see them playing off each other as these two wonderful characters. So anyway, yeah, long and the short of it, I really liked Frankenstein Unbound a lot. It was one that had been on my radar for a long time, and I just never got around to seeing it until now. Sadly, there's no Blu-ray here in North America. There's only the DVD release. I will, of course, include an Amazon link down in the description for you if you'd like to add it to your collection. And I didn't know this until I looked it up on IMDb, but it actually really bombed hard in the theater. The budget for this was about $11.5 million, and the total worldwide gross was something like $336,000. Like, it didn't come anywhere close to making its money back. So I guess that might have something to do with why we've never got a special edition of it. I don't know. It's just kind of seen as a black sheep movie of the studio, I guess. But man, that's a shame. I'm actually really shocked that it bombed that hard. Because I remember when this came out, some of my friends had seen it and they really liked it and they recommended it. But I just didn't get around to seeing it until now. So I don't know. Just one of those things. I think it's a bit of a hidden gem, personally. I enjoyed it as kind of an alternate take. Low budget sci-fi fantasy horror thing. And I liked it. Alrighty. Well, that is it from me to you for now. So big thanks to you for watching. Big thanks to my Patreon sponsors. Be sure to catch me on Twitch. I stream there almost every day. And I'll see you next time. Until then, sayonara. Yeah, kind of a modern revisionist take on the Frankenstein legend, incorporating time travel into the mix. Fucking A. The first directorial effort by Roger Corman in 30 years. Yeah, he had been a producer for ever, but didn't direct much, so what can you say? Roger Corman's first directorial effort in almost 30 years, with an incredible cast. We have John Hurt, Raul Julia, Bridget Fonda, and yeah, it's great. Why do I just keep tanking? Like I'm just going well and then not going well. Greetings, everyone. Roger Corman's first directorial effort in almost 30 years. Was it 30? Wait a minute. It was 20. It was 20 years. I've been getting it wrong the whole time. Last thing he directed was in 1971. Some thing I don't even know. 70 plus 20 is 1990. Frankenstein Unbound, Roger Corman's first directorial debut in almost 3,000 years. I amuse myself. The thing that's nice about all these fuck-ups is when I'm editing, it's like, oh, there's like a huge 20-minute chunk I can just cut and throw away. And then I feel like I'm making real progress. So as I'm making no progress now, this will translate into me feeling like I am making progress in the editing process. Funny how that works. Psychology, man. I'm fooling myself. Itchy gooch, itchy gooch. Hi. How's it going? Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another fucking review that nobody's gonna watch or care about. Today, on the Multimedia Chronicles. Sure, it'd be nice if people would, watch my fucking videos. Anyway. Oh, look, Sarah and Isaac's reviewing another movie I've never heard of. Great. Why doesn't he just do videos about The Dark Knight, talking about how much The Dark Knight is the best film ever made because The Dark Knight? Let's do like a minute review. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my review of The Dark Knight. It sucks. Dun! There, I reviewed The Dark Knight. You happy now? Here's the thing, as meticulously as I plan everything out, often even I don't know what's actually going to be next. It's all dependent on what I actually manage to get done. The schedule changes to accommodate my workflow or lack thereof. It is a fluid thing. Went down a rabbit hole the other day on YouTube of classic Sesame Street clips. And that sent me down another rabbit hole of Mr. Rogers clips. Yay, I was 3 again. Around and around and around and around. Over, under, through. Around and around and around over, under, through. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another... Okay, let's do this. Here we go. Oh, head rush. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Halloween horror movie review. And through the magic of editing, I'll make it appear that I actually know what I'm talking about. Hello. Welcome back. So, the story opens in the far-flung future of... So he sees a gentleman sitting alone. All the other tables are occupied, and he asks if he can sit there, and the gentleman says, fuck, why not? Shit, sure, fuck. So Dr. Buchanan does actually meet... Yeah, when you go into the past, don't bang anybody because that could have bad consequences. You could literally end up as your own grandparents. Yeah, if you go into the past, don't bang anybody because you could... Yeah, if you go into the past, don't go around banging people because... So he literally defeats the monster with laser beams controlled by the clapper. The end!